What's up, everybody? I'm back, and today we're going to talk about physical delivery. Physical delivery is really important. How your body speaks just as much as your words do. So, when you're giving a speech, your audience isn't just listening to what you say, they're really looking to how you say it, especially with your body. So, your posture, your gestures, your facial expressions, your eye contact, your movement, these are the five components that, when they're working in sync, can really help to make you look confident. You look in control, you look really believable and credible. But if these things are off, your audience will get distracted. You'll be communicating that you aren't confident in what you're saying. Your audience will get confused. They'll even start to get disengaged. So let's break down each of these five components today. And we'll start with posture. I'll show you my fun photos in just a moment. So the way you stand sends a message before you even start saying a single word. So it's actually one of the most important things. The moment that you walk into a room to begin public speaking, you should think about the fact that those persuasive capabilities, that has all begun before you even start to say a single word. If you come into the room and you're really slouched and you're communicating, you look withdrawn, you're fidgeting with yourself, that's going to be communicating to your audience a different message than probably what you want. So a strong speaker stands upright, balanced, grounded. Your feet should be about shoulder width apart. Your arms should be relaxed at your sides, not fidgeting with something or being in your pockets. And your shoulders should be open, not hunched or stiff. Your chest should be wide. And that shows your audience that you're present, that you're prepared, that you're confident. But there are a lot of common mistakes I see. One is leaning on one leg or kind of swaying leg to leg, slouching, crossing your arms across each other, fidgeting with them, swaying side to side, and all those habits just make you seem really nervous or disinterested or closed off. So a great tip I always give novice speakers is to stand, plant both feet, and then imagine a string really gently pulling the top of your head upward, and then take a very deep breath. And you should feel yourself settle into that confident stance where you're imagining that string pulling you up, but you're taking a breath so that you aren't stiff or overly awkward. But that's the idea here. So you can see here, it's an example, I guess, of Steve Jobs, and he looks pretty confident. He's not slouched. You can see his shoulders are wide. His feet are the correct width apart. He's gesturing at that moment, which is totally fine, but you can see he looks confident. As opposed to, I see a lot of this with novice speakers where they are standing there and they're slouching in different ways. And again, if you're just talking with your friend, that's fine. But if you're trying to command attention of an audience, then you got to make sure to stand up straight. And I think this is a good visual representation of the string tip I was talking about. You imagine that string really pulling you up, and so that should hopefully fix any of that incorrect posture. Let's go on to gestures now. Gestures are the movements that your hands and arms make that help to illustrate, emphasize, or reinforce your words. And the best gestures are purposeful. I can't give you a perfect script of exactly what gestures to use for particular words, but they have to match the tone and content of what you're saying. So for example, counting on your fingers when you're listing points is fine, like first, second, third. Or spreading your hands to indicate something large or expansive is fine. You can do rising or decreasing, something like that. Those gestures all make sense. And gestures help your audience visualize your ideas. It helps to keep them engaged, and you want them to feel really natural. Now, there's a couple of mistakes I see novices make. First, they go outside of what I like to call the gesture box, and you can see that over here. This box is where you want to keep your gestures. If you go below, I see novices do that. They keep their gestures really low, or they go way too high, and both of those are very, very awkward. So one of the mistakes I see novices make is going outside the gesture box. Another one is over-gesturing, and that's where you're waving your hands really wildly, or you're fidgeting, or you're moving them constantly. You're just doing too much with your hands, and it starts to distract your audience. The other big issue I see is under-gesturing, and that's keeping your hands just glued at your side. Now, you can see, like I said right here, when you're not gesturing, you should rest your arms at your side. And it will feel a little bit awkward at first because you're used to doing something with your hands, but you just got to trust that when you are not gesturing in a formal speech, you should rest them gently at your sides, fingers extended, not stiffly extended, but just naturally extended, not balled up into a fist or put in your pockets or clasped together. I see that, or fidgeting, etc., etc. That's I think one of the big. Those are the two big issues I typically see. So you just want to make sure to keep your hands visible and near your midsection when you gesture, and you want to make sure that the gestures feel natural, like I said, and varied and connected to your message. So let's now go to facial expressions. Facial expressions, they're actually probably one of the most important on here. I'd probably say posture, just your starting posture. If it's not confident, that undermines the whole rest of your message. But after that, facial expressions, if you are doing facial expressions well, it accents your everything else that you are saying so much more. So your face, at the end of the day, tells your audience how to feel about what you're saying. And it's one of the most powerful tools for emotional connection that you have at your disposal. A good speaker is using facial expressions to match the mood of the speech and the emotion that you're conveying. So if you're telling a funny story, you should be smiling. And if you're sharing something serious, let your face show that gravity. Your expression should reflect the tone of your message. Some common mistakes I see here, biggest one is a completely blank face. Sometimes I see people also just have the wrong facial expression or overusing one facial expression. A classic one is you just start smiling, and it's usually because you're uncomfortable having to speak in front of others, and then you're smiling as you're saying something very serious, which is obviously a mismatch. Or sometimes I see speakers, they develop this very furrowed brow that they have throughout the entire speech, and it's too intense. You got to lighten things up. Important stuff to think about are eyebrows. Eyebrows are huge. Like, you can raise your eyebrows, you can furrow them, you can raise one, you can look surprised, angry, expressive, all that stuff with your eyebrows. Eyes are obviously intrinsically part of that. Like, you can kind of like squint your eyes if you're frustrated or upset, or you can widen them if you have a sense of wonder, and that's usually linked to your eyebrows. Your mouth as well. You can be smiling, you can be frowning, all of the things that you can do with your mouth. So these three are really the components that make up facial expressions. I would say, though, it's really not about overthinking it too much, but rather getting in touch with your natural facial expressions. If you're chatting with your friends, having conversations, laughing, getting frustrated, I promise you do these things naturally, so it's just about getting used to that. A great way to practice this is to record yourself reading a paragraph with emotion and really figure out what emotion you want to read beforehand. Say, all right, I'm going to try to communicate sadness here. This is a very sad paragraph. And you record the paragraph. Or maybe you do, hey, I'm going for something joyful here, and I'm going to try to communicate joyfulness through my facial expressions. And then after you've recorded it, watch back that video on mute and ask yourself, does my face match the mood or the emotions that I was trying to convey with my words? And if not, try it again with more expression. Just doing that drill again and again will get you more comfortable with understanding on an innate and intuitive level how to have command over your facial expressions. When you're doing these facial expressions with your friends, typically you're not thinking about what you are doing. They just naturally happen. So the trick of being a great public speaker is being able to have command over these facial expressions. Next up is eye contact. Eye contact builds trust, connection, and credibility. It tells your audience that you're speaking with them, not at them. So a skilled speaker makes eye contact with different parts of the room or audience, holding each person's gaze for about one sentence, maybe 5 to 10 seconds if it's a really long sentence. And you want to make sure for it to feel inclusive. You're not just staring at one person the entire time. You're not staring over everybody in the audience. That's a classic novice mistake I see. It emerges out of nervousness. Staring at people is scary. Looking at them, if you feel that you're messing up, is nerve-wracking. But if you're looking over their heads, trust me, everybody can tell, and it looks very, very awkward. Another issue I see is you start darting your eyes, but that's not what you want. You want to instead hold eye contact with one person for about 5 to 10 seconds. Then gently, slowly, intentionally move to the next person. And you don't want it to be a rapid dart across the room, but rather you're just slowly making your way and making sure everybody in the audience is spoken with and included in the speech that you're giving. Another issue I see is novices will start looking up as they're thinking, and you're doing that to try to communicate to the audience, hey, I don't know what I'm saying right now, again, that immediately undermines the connection that you're building with your audience, and it just communicates that you aren't confident. Even if you feel that you don't really know what you're saying, if you just hold eye contact with the audience, take a second to collect yourself, and then you keep speaking, your audience probably won't even realize there was any memory blip or fluency issue going on. They'll think that you're just really solid and in command of everything that you're doing. Now let's go to movement. Movement is a powerful way to show transitions. So this is for longer speeches once we build to that. And it signals a change in a topic. It helps to create some energy. And so a good example, this typically happens at the end of body paragraphs. You finish it and you do what's called the walk. And typically you begin your speech. Well, always you should begin your speech in the middle of the room. Then as you're giving a transit, or after you finish the first body paragraph and you're transitioning to the next one, you begin walking in one direction, probably to the right. You take a couple of steps in that direction and you make sure that you're not doing it super awkwardly. You're not like pivoting your body 90 degrees and then walking that way. No, you're just still keeping your chest largely towards the audience while just moving to the side, maintaining eye contact, maintaining your confident posture, everything that we've already talked about. And then you kind of pivot and make sure that you're facing the full audience again. You're not facing just one side of the room when you walk to the right. And then at the next paragraph, you go back to the center. Then you go to the left at the end of the next paragraph. Then you go back to the center. And sometimes I see speakers also take one step forward towards the end of their speech, get a little bit closer to the audience. Again, don't get too close, but just one step forward can help to create a sense of a bold claim towards the end of your speech. So some issues I see here: pacing aimlessly or rocking back and forth. And again, like all of the things I've been talking about here, it's usually a sign of nervous energy and it distracts from your message. Instead, so yeah, I think big message as we think about all 5 of these components is really what you want to make sure you are not doing is communicating a lack of confidence to your audience. So if you're not looking at them, you're looking up, or you're slouched over, or you're fidgeting with your hands, all of that isn't communicating confidence. And second, you want to make sure that you're not doing anything that would be highly distracting to your audience. And that usually happens with your hands. You start doing weird things with your hands as you're speaking without even realizing it. Again, we could do the same drill that we did in the last video where we went and we actually looked at 2 different speakers, a freshman and a national champion like Angad. I recommend you do that on your own, but actually the best drill that I would really recommend that everybody does is you go and you record a video of yourself and you watch it. And you do the same thing I talked about in the last video, where you look at the rubric for physical delivery. And you think about each of these 5 components: posture, gestures, facial expression, eye contact, movement, and go down them one by one and really assess how you are doing on each of these. Do you have a very confident posture, or are you slouching? Do you have well-intentioned and varied gestures that are appropriate to the content of what you're saying? And are your arms resting nicely at your side, or are you over-gesturing or under-gesturing throughout your speech? Your facial expressions, are they matching the mood and the emotion that you're attempting to convey? Eye contact, are you maintaining good eye contact? Obviously, that's a little bit harder if you're just recording a video, but you could still watch for little things like, are your eyes darting around? Are you looking up when you're thinking about what to say next? All of that stuff. So if you think about breaking down each of these components into criteria that you can then drill and train and assess, that will really help in terms of growing your skills. Again, the last thing you want is to think about public speaking as some people are just really good at it and some people aren't. No, like any skill, public speaking is just a series of a bunch of smaller skills. And if you drill those components, you'll start to get really good at public speaking and you'll see it all start adding up. So hopefully, let's recap the essentials. We've learned about posture, how to be grounded and confident. We've learned about gestures, how to be purposeful, not random. We've learned about facial expressions, how to be emotionally aligned with your message. We've learned about eye contact, how to be regular and inclusive and steady. And we've learned about movement, how to be intentional and meaningful. And again, none of this has to be perfect right away, but the more aware you become of your physical presence, the more effective and persuasive you'll be as a speaker. Hopefully this was helpful. I'll see you all for the next one.